Okay, a fun little scene right here using the Lady on Horse and the Shore with Cabin stamp right here. The Lady on Horse was kind of an afterthought, but I think it really added to this overall composition. But kind of more straightforward coloring here in terms of brown elements in the form of the pier and cabin. That's all on one stamp. Grassy areas on both the shore area, you know, the setting for the cabin and pier, as well as the grassy bluff right here. And then we have this space of water. It looks like, it's more like two spaces right here, but they are connected through that little space right there. But the thing that I show in this video is by utilizing some of the tones, some very light browns in the grasses here, that grassy area here, and some of the very light blues in the grass and cabin and bluff right here, can really work to unify these separate objects and areas within the scene, okay? And then I've done really some subtle things, you know, in this little figure right here. There are some light or lit areas within the form, and I've brought some of those colors from like the window here into her hair, and some of the blues from the water into the horse, you know. And all those little things like that can kind of create a stronger continuity between all of the objects and yourself, leading to, you know, potentially kind of a stronger visual harmony going on within the piece. So not just for scenic stamping, but you can apply that to any forms of stamping, you know, where you have a lot of different images going on. So you can create stronger relationships through color, texture, and pattern, and on. You know, there's many different ways you can do it. So anyways, if you watch the scene, watch the video, hope you enjoy it. Thanks as always for tuning into the channel. Okay, let's use a little bit of color today, alright? I've been doing a lot of scenes that are basically compositions developed with black dye-based inks, okay? I've created layouts, basically, in the form of those, what I call stamp sketches. And in those one, I really wasn't too concerned, or concerned really at all, about further kind of expanding on those layouts with the use of color. So I just stamped them all on black, but this one is one where I will utilize color in the actual impressions to kind of set the tone for the color scheme that will be developed in the scene, as well as kind of establishing kind of the overall, I guess you can say, like time of day, season, whatnot, through the use of color. In other words, if I'm using green here, it's not going to be the dead of winter in some area that, you know, would be covered in snowfall during those times of year. If you do it all in black, then you can kind of take it either way. But starting off with color like this is kind of a faster way to establish those seasons, okay? Or those times of year, whatnot, you know, the environment, you might say. Okay, I think one of my pens is a little bit dry on here, but that's alright. That was the Grassy. I'm trying to think of the name of that one. A lot of these stamps are really new, so I kind of forget the names of them. Alright. But the names and all that stuff will be listed in the Show More section underneath these all these videos. You can click on the Show More under the video, and it'll have a listing of all stamps used, as well as media, brands, etc. Okay, now this is brown. This is a dark brown. It's a number 18 Marvy. And I'm kind of hitting the objects in here that have, you know, that are representative of wood, so that cabin in there and the pier. And that was a dark brown. Here's a lighter brown. Let's see if there's a name on it. Burnt Umber. Okay, this pen actually has a name on it. I don't know the names of all my pens, especially if they're not in pad form. Then I've kind of forgotten a lot of the names of these things. But okay, going around a little bit on the shoreline as well. I don't just have brown only for the cabin and green for the the grassy surrounding area. I like to do a lot of blending so that there's color inherent in the objects, but they also will kind of blend and harmonize with the surrounding objects as well. So I don't like to just color one thing one color and another thing another, completely different color. I like to do a little blending so that there's a bit more of an inherent color harmony between the different areas here. Now, I don't know if I want brown in my water down here, okay, but I won't do something so extreme like that. But if some of this blue does go up in that shoreline there and some of that brown and green go into my water, then so be it. All right, there's a lot more coloring to be done, so I might be a little bit more careful if all I was going to do was stamp the imagery out only, okay, and not do any further coloring of it. But on this one, we will not worry about that. Okay, so here's this cabin like so, right? So we're kind of looking down into the scene. All right, now if I'm going to be using multimedia on here, I have to kind of think about, just in general, about how inks and different media will apply to this scene, okay? So I'm thinking about some pen work, colored pencil. Colored pencils are waxy, so I know that I can't lay some of that down and apply dye-based inks over the top of it. It won't stick to that wax, so the colored pencils will have to be kind of remain something that we do at the end. All right, I'm thinking about bringing some greens into this and some browns into the cabin and pier. We'll have our water, some different shades of blue, and we'll use some alcohol inks as well. So I think that's plenty to choose from. So let's see here. Let's work a little bit differently here. Let's apply a little bit of color using a sponging technique. We'll go with pear tart and bamboo leaves for some green tones. Okay, this is just a color box stylus tool if you haven't seen these used before. I'm just very lightly applying this, okay? It doesn't really show too much with one swipe, but that's not a good time to start scrubbing harder with your tool. Just build it up very gradually like this, okay? And if you notice on these images, there are some lighter areas and darker areas. What I usually do is I bring in some of my lighter tones. I'm starting off with a very light green, okay? And I might bring that light green into some of those lighter areas, like on the tops of these ridges right here, okay? Oh, this is called Grassy Bluff, by the way, this image. I just remembered. Okay, but now, in the darker area of this, I'll bring my darker colors, but maybe leave those lighter areas just as is, okay? And that'll be the same for this area in here. We can color our... There's some little bluffs, this little slope on this shore with cabin stamp as well. So we can kind of vary things accordingly. Okay, my images were a little bit wet still, so there's a little bit of smearing going on. You can do this on matte paper as well. I just did it on the glossy, but the matte in this technique that we'll be doing is perfectly fine. Matte cardstock absorbs your inks a little bit faster though, so you might have to re-ink, a little more often. Okay, so that is the pear tart. It's just basically a light green. Bamboo leaves is a little bit darker version of green, but it's also, the most important thing is it's a darker value of green, so I'm going to be working through a nice range of values here. See, that gets a little bit darker right here, but that bluff remains a little bit light, the top sides of the bluff, okay? And then bringing this into our little grassy area around our cabin down here. Perhaps a nice spring day, morning, whatnot, whatever it might be. As far as the time of day goes, it's all up to you. Okay, so you can see that it's kind of right along the shoreline there. There's a little bit of variation. Where it's darker and where it's lighter, it's all up to you. But kind of the variation gives it a little bit more richness through the use of variation, okay? One of the things I like to do is when an object is on some kind of surface, any type of surface, I like to create a little bit of a shadow, okay? Like something like that. Alright, so it sits the object into the scene a little bit more. Okay, let's vary this area around the cabin a little bit more. Okay, we'll oscillate it with some lights and darks, leave some areas light, and darken some other areas, okay? So you can kind of see the beginnings of a, somewhat of a lighting scheme going on in here. It doesn't matter where things are. You don't have to analyze it so much and say, okay, wait a minute, that should be lighter and that should be darker, or what part of the grass do you make lighter and darker? I just kind of reference the images, and if it's darker in some areas, I tend to go with that, so at the base of this cabin, I do have a little bit of shading going on, so I just kind of reiterate it, but where, you're uncertain, like in this open area, it doesn't really matter, just leave some of it light, okay? And it doesn't really matter where. Yeah, there's more kind of sophisticated lighting schemes and, strategies you might, put into use, but if you don't know, then just leave some of it light and some of it make a little bit darker. Alright, now in this meadow down here, you can use that kind of ripped paper towel masking technique if you want to. Alright, and add a little bit of variation like this. Okay, see that right there? Let's move it up here. Add in some more. If you don't have a color box stylus tools or an applicator that you like using, maybe, if you can't, especially if you can't find them in somewhere, they're on the Stampscapes website, but like, say if you're overseas, or you know what I mean, or if you just want to try out this technique, then buy a pack of very inexpensive cosmetic sponges. It's a really great sponge. They're very dense, and you can apply inks, just like this. Just kind of be careful. Don't get, that, the angles, or you can trim it a little bit, where it's less angular, but you can apply inks like this just as easy. It might not be quite as comfortable, as a specific tool, but they, they do the job. And you'll get used to it, don't get frustrated after using it for like a couple seconds, like, oh my god, that's hard, If you do a scene using one of these, you'll be completely used to it, by the end of the scene. Always kind of play around and experiment a little bit, so you don't want that. Right there, I was getting a little bit of that, so I'll just kind of mix it in like so, and blend it in. Anyway, so you can see what's kind of going on now with this little surface here. There's a lot of variation in there, right? So it doesn't look so flat and two-dimensional. Alright, let's see. Let's use a little bit more of this. Okay, kind of anchoring my cabin down a little bit more. You see what that shadow does right here? It really kind of makes the object kind of sit into the scene more. You're saying that the object is it's not transparent. I'm going to color the the cabin too, so it'll blend in with this a little bit more. It'll sit in the scene a little bit more and give it some weight, but with the shadow around it, and you're really anchoring it in as far as an object that's that has visual weight to it. But you're also saying that it's not, you know, just transparent, you know, with the light shining right through it, you know, where it casts no shadow. Okay, going with some of this darker tone down here in my bluff as well. This is cottage ivy, by the way. It's not, it's like a darker green, you know, as far as this range goes, but it's not too dark. Right? I think I could use a little bit of a darker one too, but I'll just go with this one for right now. Alright, so that is that. Let's go with the same green that we used for some of this imagery, okay? And this is just the number 4 Marvy green. It's a little bit darker. I have this in pad form, but let's just use the pen just because you know, that's what I used on the images. Okay, and I'll apply it down here too at the base of the scene. Okay. Alright. Let's start addressing the water. I mean, we could do the cabin too, but here's a lot of open space here. Let's go with this number 36 manganese blue. Alright, just if you don't have, you know, like a pen like this, which hardly any of you will have, if any of you have it, I'd be amazed. I don't see too many people with these Marvy pens anymore. These 1600 series ones. And this color did not come in the Marvy matchables either, so. I love salvia blue, you know, in terms of the Marvies, but I would have preferred the manganese. Alright, so let's add some of this color down into the scene. It's a very bright one, okay? Now this Marvy inks are very thin, so they're really absorbing. So I'm really prone to getting, you know, like, you know, kind of a shape like that in this piece. So I'm going to be careful, and I'm going to use a very light touch when applying this color, okay? I'll use some other colors as well. I need some more kind of that'll blend in. If you're using like a cosmetic brush, where's the brush? Oh, I have this kind of makeup applicator. Here we go, right here, that someone gave to me at the Carson show. Thanks again. But you can also kind of dab this down, you know, or you can apply inks with those kind of stipple brush types of applicators, you know, to give yourself kind of a real Kind of gives you a real pastel, kind of real light application of ink. Okay, same thing. You know, here's this large body of water. I'm talking about relative to the size of this paper right here. In terms of the space. It's not large in terms of, you know, it's a vast ocean or something like that. But we do have quite a bit of area we can fill in here, you see. So what I was getting at is just vary it just as we varied our lighting or our shade that defines the light within these spaces. Do the same thing for right down here. So you know, you see what I mean? Just, you know, leave an area that's a little bit illuminated. With water, it's kind of fun to do these striations, horizontal, like this, just to break up that space. I'm kind of turning my applicator at an angle like this, too. I'm not just using it flat. If I have a very kind of thin edge here, you know, it's easier to apply that than something that's coming into contact, you know, with the surface of the paper in too wide of an application, you know. So see it, in other words, if there's a lot of surface area that I'm touching down, especially if it's on matte paper or something like that, it's really pulling on this object right here. But if I have a very thin one like this, I put it at an angle like this, and I drag it. Same thing with the cosmetic sponge. If you kind of drag it at an angle, it's like a thinner blade, okay? You know, like an ice skate isn't, you know, the blade isn't this, you know, thick. It's, you know, it's very thin where it comes in contact with the ice, where it has at least, you know, a smaller amount of resistance. And that's what we're doing here. We're just kind of turning this from, you know, flat to an angle and applying it that way. So I use my stylus tools a lot like that, at angles, okay? So it creates less drag on our applicator. All right, let's switch over to the Memento Blue here. I could come in with some more of this later, but the Memento inks, Distress inks, Stampin' Up, etc., those inks are thicker than Marby, so they're a little bit easier to apply, but still use the same kind of principle as far as you know, the amount of ink you apply in a given area. Kind of vary it, well, unless you're doing, you know, something, you know, that's you know, the dead of night or something like that, and you have a, you know, completely blue area with no light at all, you know. But just in general, I almost vary my application of inks just about everywhere within a given scene, if it is fairly dark. When you change your values, and oscillate them from light and dark across any given surface or space, it just opens up the chance for, you know, greater visual richness, okay, through variation. It's not so monotone, like my voice is. Very monotone, you know, not contributing to a very interesting presentation style. So don't color like I talk. All right, so here, applying it, kind of get underneath this pier here. Like I said, you know, when you set these shadows down here, we're applying a little bit more ink underneath things like that. Objects. Okay, and we'll do some background blue up here as well. We have this small space in here, but let's vary it again, you know, some more. Okay, I don't need to mask off my cabin. I'm just going to go like that and kind of drag out from there. I mean, if you want a mask, you can. Personally, I tend not to do that very often. It's just kind of another step for the non-lazy stamper. I'm a lazy stamper, believe it or not. I don't want to mask. I don't want to, go through certain processes if I can get away with not doing it. All right, sometimes, we have to mask. There's just no other way around it, but in instances like this, I don't really care if I get a little blue in something, where it's not blue. Like, I'm coming into the green, and that's not a big deal at all, because blue is a component of green. I don't want to come in with the blue in the cabin too much, if I do, it'd be a small amount. But by and large, it'll just remain brown. Okay? So we have that going on here right now. Maybe a little bit more tone around the edge of the water, creating that separation between land and water. Yeah, okay, where did my darker memento go? I really need a pad organizer for my desk, so I can kind of see everything lined up. Okay, of course it's always the bottom pad, Danube blue. You might notice I'm working through a range of values in my water now, from light to dark, okay? Just like those greens, I kind of worked from light to dark with that. Alright, now the darker tone, maybe it doesn't come in quite as far as the previous color. You don't have to analyze it too much, just don't fill up this entire area and eradicate the light that you've established in there, okay? That's what happens a lot, with people kind of early on in approaching lighting, okay? They're used to coloring areas 100%. Like an outline stamp, if there's various sections of that stamp, they'll color one thing one color, one whole section of it, and another section will be done and it'll be completely colored in. Instead of kind of doing partial coloring, okay, like in an area like this, I'm leaving some light, okay, that's for this variation, but you might be, most people do some form of this. It's just kind of an abbreviated form, like when someone stamps something, a little object out or something like that, they color it in. They might do a little bit of textured coloring around it, but oftentimes they'll take a pad or something like that, or a brush or whatever, and they'll dab a little bit of color around it just to kind of give it a slight framing and vignette. This is the same type of thing right here. It's the same exact concept, but maybe you're taking color in farther than you would when you're just putting a border tone around something. Okay, again, this is the Danube blue. It's like a royal blue, I would say. Maybe not quite as dark as like a navy. I know I'm not saying that because that's the color that you need to use. I'm just kind of describing it because the camera here doesn't exactly, the colors don't always look exactly like they do kind of in real life or in person. Okay, so this is kind of adding it down. I can add it into my grassy area too, just to give it a little bit more continuity, especially around in the four corners. Kind of gives it a strong vignette and frames things off. Okay, let's start approaching that brown, okay? Let's see here. Why is there so much? Oh, these are. I was going to say, I just cleaned these tips off yesterday. I already used several. I already used 6 sides, so they all have some color on them. Okay, let's use... okay, let's see. Let's use the desert sand for a memento. Let's kind of give this a memento themed. I'm using some of the Marvy pens too, but... Okay, let's go in here. And again, this is desert sand. It's kind of a tan, but any kind of light brown will do. Well, in the cabin, I'm kind of working around those windows, leaving them a little bit lighter so that maybe if I want to add some kind of color to them later, like a yellow or something like that, you know, like a warm light coming from the interior, I can still do that. Alright, now I think I like this desert sand, this very kind of beige, light brown hue. I think that would look good in my grass as well. Okay, so kind of, I don't know if you can tell, it's very subtle, but it's kind of warming that up a little bit. It's kind of giving it a little bit of a stronger glow. I love kind of brown, aged tones in grass. I think it makes them look a little bit more full and, I don't know, maybe more realistic too, you know, than just having only green. Okay. Yeah, that really helped. It has a nice warm tint to it. Okay. In fact, I think that might look good even in my water. Let's give it a try. Maybe don't do it everywhere. Maybe to give a streak here and there, like that. See, this hue is so light. It normally wouldn't, you know, like a darker brown might not harmonize with that water in there, but this one right here, the value is so light, you can really experiment with and test it out. And if you don't like it, it's not really a big commitment to that general hue, because it is a very light value of that hue. Okay? See that right there, how it really gave a little bit of temperature to that water area, and I think it's glowing a little bit more as a result. It's kind of glowing because it's a different temperature. It is a different hue, too. But that temperature change in there really makes it pop out, even though it's a very, very subtle, very, you know, almost extremely light value. Okay, that is good there. Alright, now underneath that bridge, that pier there, that area needs some additional tone and value to establish it as something, you know, like I was saying, a little bit more opaque, where it's casting a shadow. I'm going to grab out some different tones of pens here. These are alcohol pens, some are shuttle art, and some are the permanent Le Plumes, okay? Marvy Le Plumes. Let's grab out a few tan-ish colors. I'm just eyeballing it. There's no kind of definitive plan. Here's a potato brown, yellow ochre, and terracotta. Alright, let's start off with the lighter one here, and I can color in very specifically areas within the cabin. That's easier to get to than or easier to apply than, you know, with the stylus tool and a wide brush. Alright, that was a little bit yellowy, this terracotta. You can say, well, you should have known it's terracotta, alright, but let me go back into a lighter value, hue. No, that one's not very light right there. Let me try. Oh, here's a pastel peach right here. Okay, very light. Let's blend that in a little bit more. You can kind of go back in with your lighter tones and blend those colors in. Let's apply it to this one, to some of this rooftop right here. Okay. It's still not light enough for me, though. Let's go with the Le Plume Apricot. Okay, that one's a little bit lighter. Let's kind of blend that in a little bit. Okay. It's a little bit yellowy for me still. Oh, let's bring some of this into this pier. And let's try... Oh, I need a very, very light brown, I think. Sepia. How about that one? Okay. It's a little bit more mellow, less yellowy. Certainly has a yellow component to it. Let's bring that into our cabin. A few little details here and there. Do the same with the pier down here. Maybe color in a plank or two a little bit different. You know, so there's some variation. Okay. Now let's go back to... I forgot the color of this one. Oh yeah, pastel peach. So I kind of go back and forth a little bit, or a lot. You know, just kind of blend these in a little bit more. So let's take a look and see what this will look like down here in this grass. Okay. So you kind of create a little bit of relationships between these different areas. Some of that desert sand ink from in here, cabin, was down here in the grass, as well in the water. Adding some of this onto the pier, bring this into the grassy area as well. Okay. I'm kind of hitting this in some of the darker areas of my scene, just so it's a little bit more subtle. Alcohol ink shouldn't blend or, you know, mix with your dye-based ink, so you don't need to worry about that. But I don't know if you can tell, there's a little bit of a tinge of this tone, you know, from the cabin down here. It doesn't look like that cabin color because we have all that grass green in here. But overall, it creates that stronger harmony. You see that kind of that warm glow, you know, created by that color happening in other areas of the scene. Okay, so let's take this one as well, apricot. Let's blend this out a little bit more here. Okay, and let's blend this in here. Okay, put it on the bridge, background area. Something like that. Come in the shadows as well. Alcohol inks and dye-based inks, they're all transparent, so the colors underneath will affect the overall appearance of colors that, you know, have been overlaid. The top of them glazed, you know, you're kind of glazing, you know, colors over the top of one another. All right, let's play around with some blue values. I guess different blue hues too. There's slightly different values of them. Well, these ones look really similar right here. This one to this one and this one to this one. Although from my, you know, little experience of working with these pens, I haven't used them too much, but the colors don't always look the same, although this one does. This one is sky blue. It does look pretty close to the cap indexing of it. Going along the base of this, remember how I was saying I'm going to add some shadows underneath this pier here? You can do it with a pen like this. And there are shadows along the water's edge too, so I'm just going in here and reiterating it with this pen. Okay, let's try this one. I think this one, yeah, this one's salvia blue. So you can vary your blue tones. It doesn't have to be all one blue. It doesn't have to be all one blue value. You can use several values of things, and that contributes to a potentially richer surface. Okay. So I'm kind of just going like this. I'm going along with the kind of the spirit of the edge of that shape. Okay. I don't want it that distinct, but I'll blend that out. Okay, let me see. Baby blue. Did I use this one yet? I don't even remember. Okay. Alright, let's go with this one right here. This one's really light. This one's called pale blue, and it's practically nothing. And I'll blend that out a little bit. Okay, so we'll come into it and kind of take it out here a little bit more. A little bit more streaky. It doesn't completely go back to the solution, but it changes it a little bit. Let's bring some of this blue into our cabin, into our grass. Alright. Perhaps a little bit more harmony. Color harmony, at least. Okay. Let's try this one. Sky blue. Forgive me if I've used some of these before. I can't remember. I'm just kind of working so fast, just grabbing things. Alright. This one. Boy, this one looks really dark. French blue. Let's apply a little bit of that around here. Into some of these shadows. Some of the deeper shadows, maybe. And I'm just doing it very thin like this. Now I do like these brush tip markers. The shuttle art ones just have this kind of more fine-tipped point like that. But the La Plume permanents probably cost, I don't know, I'm guessing $1 more per pen. And those ones aren't two-sided. Although I barely ever use the chisel size side of the two-sided pen. Like, you know what I mean? I almost have no use for that side, so it's nice having it available, but I almost never use that. But I was going to say these shuttle art pens are like 50 cents each, so they're really inexpensive. Alright, so we have a nice water's edge here. It's pretty well defined. That French blue I'm kind of blending out a little bit, or a lot, just so it's not so tightly defined. See these little shadows right here on this little waterside bluff area? I kind of added ink in there, but, you know, with the dye-based inks, I'm just going in and reiterating that with this pen now, okay? It gives it a little bit more volume and shading, but the volume, in terms of the three-dimensional aspect of things, not sound. And the volume is kind of achieved by modeling something in terms of how you treat given areas of it with shade. Okay. So it's sitting in the scene more. Alright, just for kicks, let's play around with some colored pencil. Well, okay, let me put on the brakes of that one. I forget. If I'm going to stamp more images in here, I need to do it before I, use the colored pencils, but let's play around with it a little bit. Okay, so these windows right here. Let's see if I have a really pale, dull yellow of some sort. Let's see. This one's called pastel yellow. That sounds about what I want. This one's dandelion. That was way too intense. I think it's going to be this one. I think it's going to be the pastel. Oh, okay. This is okay, even better. How about Pale yellow, okay. I didn't want it so intense, okay? So, oh, perfect, okay. That's the beauty of a 80 pen set, you know. Chances are you'll find, hopefully, what you'll need, although it doesn't have everything. I think there might be a 120 pen set or something like that, but I figured I'd be able to get what I needed in 80. But just coloring in these windows here with some light, making it look like there's, you know, kind of a warm light coming from within. Use some of it down here on these bluffs as well. Okay. I think you kind of get the point here as far as the blending of tones throughout different imagery, even though that's brown, that's green, that's blue, that's green again. You kind of bring in a little bit of each, at least the lightest values of each, into these other sections. It doesn't mean you have to have brown in everything or something like that, but it does kind of add to that overall visual harmony that looks so good when applied into something like a natural environment. It could be an urban environment too, which is also a natural environment, right? Things are going to be reflective of one another. You have this building that's painted red or something like that. If it's right next to a white building, when that light is hitting that red building, chances are that white building right next to it, you know, it's going to be reflecting some of that reddish hue off of that, you know, as a result of the reflected lighting. I was going to say, the lighting isn't so strong in here. I was going to say, here's a white piece of paper, and if I put that right up against there, yeah, I don't have the lighting, but you might be able to see if I put a strong enough light on here, you know, it would reflect down here, and it wouldn't be white. You'd see some colors here. I think it would need like a 500 watt, you know, light bulb or something like that, more closely in light to sun, you know, the sunlight. All right, let's see what we can do in here. Things are looking a little bit bare in terms of my bluffs, and I haven't forgotten about that. I just want to add in some additional imagery in here, but I'm not sure what yet. I'm thinking about I could put some trees on this bluff right here. That might be a good idea. Or I could put some kind of object here. I think I want to put something object right on this bluff right here, like they're looking down into the scene. So let me pause this and let me go take a look around. I want to see what I feel like using. I might use one of the new images, but I'm not sure yet which one. Okay, I think I know what I want to do. I was going to put an animal up here and call it like Guardian or something like that, like a wolf, but this lady on horse would go really well here, and I think putting her right here on this bluff, it looks like she's looking down at that cabin to me, so I think that would be a good choice, and I'm just going to do, well, I was just thinking about doing it all black, but I don't know, since we are working with a little bit more color here, let's see if we can get a little bit of variation. I want her to stand out a little bit, or a lot, so I'm not going to do too much brown on here, but let's bring a little bit of brown into it. So I'm kind of, as I'm applying this, I'm kind of wiping off some ink, because I've colored all of this in black. Okay. And I don't want her to be too light, because she's going to have to stand up against that blue water down there that's already been established. Okay. And down here, around the grass, around the the horse's feet. I'll put a little bit of green down there, so it's green-black, and it's brown-black up in this area, mostly on the top surface, top surfaces. Alright, now, dye-based ink might not apply really well over the top of alcohol ink, so I'm going to hold this down a little bit longer and just allow that ink to transfer, okay? Ideally, I would have done that before I applied some dye-based inks. Alcohol inks into the scene, okay? But I don't think I put a lot of alcohol inks in this water area. Or not too much. I don't know. Did I bring in some of that really pale version of something and kind of slather it over it? I might have. So we'll see how this goes right here. Okay, we'll allow that ink to transfer as much as possible. And I say that because sometimes if you stamp it down too quick and pull it off, it works like a vacuum, especially if the surface is a little bit moist with previously applied dye-based inks, or possibly another type of ink completely, in the form of the alcohol inks. Okay, so that should be good. Yeah, there we go. Kind of adds a little bit of drama to the scene, wouldn't you say? Look at that. Look at that. It changed the spirit of the scene for sure. I don't know what the focal point is. I think we start off with her, then our eyes travel over to the cabin. So there's this dynamic between those two. But I don't know, a little wolf or something like that sitting right here would be kind of interesting too. It's that dynamic of people and animals and whatnot. The nature of kind of curiosity with animals and whatnot. Certain ones, like dogs especially. Wild dogs. Not something like a deer, which would be kind of more skittish, like prey animals, I guess. Alright, this is Rocks and Water Small. I'm going to apply some texture down here in the water. And I'll do it in a fairly subtle value. Okay, let's start off with the summer sky is not going to be able to show up at all, but I just want to see it in terms of what it might look like, okay? In a very subtle form. It's like completely invisible. It's adding a little bit. I can kind of barely see it. Alright, just kind of establishing a little bit of a texture down there. If it's not completely invisible, it almost is. Okay, now I'll go with this Bahama blue that we used in the scene, okay, to color. And I'll use some of this down in here. Like that. Alright, now that's darker than what it'll look like when it dries, but see, I'm kind of just adding in some of that texture in there. Just for kind of the sake of variation and to give that water a little bit more depth. Alright, now let's do it in black, okay? But instead of this black right here, what I'll do is I'll ghost stamp it and then come over here and go for that second impression of it. I want to give that water not only surface, but depth underneath there. And I'll just do it in the form of those rocks. And what we're saying is, you know, that water is very, like, crystal clear. All right? Now, when that water, you know, that gets real texturized like that, I'll wait for that to dry a little bit, then I'll come over the top of it with a few streaks of inks, just to kind of blend it in a little bit more so it doesn't look so kind of crazy textured in there. All right, now that horse, let's add some tone to it. Let's say that horse is like black. So the shadows would often be kind of blue, and that would give it a connection between it and the water in terms of tone. Let's give that woman, let's give her kind of golden hair or what. I'm just doing that because it's just, it might, from a visual standpoint, kind of relate to that light coming out of that cabin if I just do that. Okay, so it creates this connection between the two. All right. How about yellow ochre or something of that sort, something that's been used in the cabin. Let's use it on some of her trail packs, maybe her pants right here, her saddle. Hat. Okay, so just creating that connection between some of these different things in here, different areas, you might say. Okay, is that ink ready to be, those objects ready to be blended in a little bit more? I think so. Let's come across in here. I'm doing it with the Danube blue. Okay, something like that. Just kind of darkening that water's edge a little bit more, or this area in here where there might be shadows, you know, from this bluff. This area right down here is really sticky with kind of drying alcohol inks. Okay, let's go in. Now she's stamped in black, so I am going to take some of this black here now. Let's try the cosmetic sponge for this, okay? And let's add in a little bit of a stronger vignette, okay? What this looks like when applied is just this. You see how it gives a kind of a really soft application of whatever color you're doing it in. This one happens to be black. You can see that really darkens that area in quite a bit, but it's doing it in a very, very pale gray, you know, even after consecutive taps. So it really puts on a really nice soft application of whatever color you're applying for whatever effect you're going after in a very gradual way. Okay, down here at the water's edge. The person that gave me this brush said it was, okay, I forgot, it was like 8 of them for $12 or something like that. And these should be able to be found, I would guess, anywhere in the world. Okay, kind of putting a little bit of stronger vignette up here, and you see by making the area behind the cabin darker, it makes those cabin lights stand out a little bit stronger by contrast. Okay, let's do it on this corner as well, just to create that, complete the vignette containment of the darker ink. Okay. How about a little bit underneath that pier? Yeah, some of it's getting on the pier, I'm sure, but I don't mind. Around the water's edge. How about on some of this grass, around these bluffs here? At the base of the cabin. A little bit of a stronger shadow. See the base of the pier? Kind of makes the pier stand out a little bit more as well. Okay. Now, let's add in some additional foreground here, and we'll really push the depth in the scene. And I'm trying to decide what I want to do for that. I could almost put some smaller figures down here too. I was thinking, I don't know if I'm going to do that. I have a smaller horse. It'd be kind of interesting right down in here. Huh. You can use a bare tree right here. That'd be a good silhouette right there. Let me think about that smaller horse down here. Okay, this is the horse that I was thinking about, but it's too big. See, if I put it right here, in terms of the relationship between the cabin, that horse would look way too big. A position that horse would look kind of natural is it not in the water, but if I placed it down here, kind of where this figure could be overlooking that. But I don't have any grass down here, so it would have had to have been planned down. I would have had to, there's another shore right that I could have had right down here if I wanted to, but right down here would have been good. Either that or I needed a smaller version of this horse, which might not be a bad idea. It'd be really small right in there. Not too much smaller, because we don't want to make it look like some kind of miniature horse right next to the cabin or something like that, but a little bit smaller than that would have worked. So, let's move on here to some foreground. I want to do some other things in here, but I might need to stamp this out first. I was thinking about some gel pen work and whatnot, but I'm not sure how that will look with my VersaFine. I can't stamp out anything that the VersaFine won't stick to, okay? And things like waxy colored pencils or something like that. The VersaFine does have some really great coverage characteristics to it, but it's still not going to stamp on some kind of thing that's resistant to any kind of water-based media like wax would be, okay? Alright, this is a leafless pine right here, large. let's put this in the foreground right here. I colored the whole thing because I wasn't quite sure where I was going to place it, but you know, I would color it more than you think you'll need or you're going to use. That way you can make the choice when you're about to use it. Okay, and again, I'm just kind of holding it down because I do have some, or a lot of alcohol-based marks, like especially all over down here. So let's hope this transfers over. If it doesn't, I can probably fill in a little bit with some pen work or something like that. Actually, it stamped out just fine. The VersaFine's a very thick style of, pigment ink. And it dries very quickly, in comparison to the other types of pigment ink. Okay. All right, just using a small section right here. So I use this image right here. I'm reminded that I actually counted out all these little individual branches right here, and where it branches off from those branches, certain numbers, to kind of harmonize odd and even branch tips, for compositional harmony. And how it would look when done in repetition here. So this is an example of it done in repetition. Okay. But anyways, I've kind of framed off my figure here. See that? So we've increased the depth of it, as the overall scene as well. Okay, don't forget your tack and peel covering and reapply that. Okay, so we have our scene here, overlooking that area down there. It's like after a nice, beautiful ride. Perhaps they got up in the morning for an early morning ride, I'm not sure. Well, let's take a look at this scene, and how about adding some nice highlights and details into the scene. Okay. All right. Let's zoom in here a little bit for some very detailed work. Okay. On the tops of these bluffs right here, we have this illuminated area, okay? See on these ridges right here? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and add a little bit of highlighting to that, which will be kind of a form of illumination. It's kind of a little sparkles. We can call it flowers or something like that too, if it looks more like that than illumination. This little area back here is a little bit lighter, right? So I can add a little bit of light to that. We have these rocks down here. Okay, so on the top sides of some of those rocks, I can put a little bit of a highlight on them. So what you do is you add a little bit of shadow to the base of them, but if they're still illuminated in the end and not completely in shadow, you can put a little bit of highlight on the top. All right, so we have our bluff right here. Okay, on the top side of that, where it's still illuminated, I can put a little bit of highlight in on top there to reiterate that lighting within there. And by the way, this is a Uniball Signo 0.7 gel pen. Okay, You got a white gel pen that's working, should work just fine though. Alright, now we see our illuminated water down there. Let's add a few little highlights into that water. Add a little bit more in the lit areas, you know, the areas that haven't been toned out. And then as you go out into the water, as it spreads apart, put a little bit more space in between your dots, okay? So it's kind of dissipating. The rooftop here, you can put a few little, maybe I'll go with a few little touches on there. And that white stands out a little bit more than I'd want it to. So, that being said, let me dip into my fantastic, very reasonable, reasonably priced shuttle art. I would show this pack. I have a video of it online, but it's the shuttle art 100. They call it the 360 gel pen set, which is, I don't know if that, I guess technically that's what it is, but it's, there's a, let me see if I can show this here. I don't like moving it because it's in the corner of my desk here, and there's a bunch of things, but here's all these pens right here. 180 colors, and then see those little things down here? Those are the refills. So there's refills for every one of those colors right there. There isn't like a number on the refill, so you're going to have to match it up by eyeballing it, but I don't know if I'll ever run out of ink on these things, though. But here's a couple very pale versions of, like, that brown in there, right? Maybe this one a little bit more. So there isn't a name of color on that, you know. That 180 color, 180 refill set cost about $25. So I'm not complaining about, hey, you know, what color is this? You know, I can't tell. You know, they're not going to be able to sell that for that price if they start kind of putting, you know, names of colors on all their barrels and things like that. But these work great. Like in an area like this, I'm just kind of going along with some of these tiles, you know, they're on the rooftop up here, or the wood grain. I can kind of add a little streak or something like that. I'm just kind of reiterating some of the marks that are on the designs themselves. Okay, so you see these slats running across here, these planks in the pier. I'm just going to go put a few little line. I'm going to do some line work in the same direction as those slats, just to give it a little bit more texture. Okay, and we have this down here as well in this cabin. We have maybe the porch is, you know, getting a little bit of lighting from within or exterior or something like that. But it just, I don't know, it just puts a little bit, see that little, those strokes down there, I just did it in this, you know, the same direction as the design itself. You know, there's some logs up there. I don't know if I want to use this light of a color, but well, let's do that thing where we're keeping in the spirit of kind of harmonizing hues throughout the scene. I have to be careful with this versifying. I think it's still very wet. Here's like a more coffee brown tinge. I don't think I've used it before. I have to get it. You have to. That's not clogged. I've just never used it before. You see how you have to get these kind of flowing. Here it comes. Let me do this right here. There we go. It's coming. Let me see. A little bit more. A little bit more. It goes. I haven't had any clogging of these yet. Sometimes they have that little rubber tip on it that I didn't realize that I didn't take off here, so. Alright. Okay, there we go. I was going to say, is this won't be my first shuttle art pen that's clogged, and no, it is not. I'm not expecting it to clog. They make these inks fairly thin, so that clogging just doesn't seem to be quite a a factor as kind of the early gel pen days. Where you might get a brand new pen and it doesn't work, straight out of the pack or straight off the shelf. It was very frustrating. Okay, let's add a little highlights on some of these saddle areas on the horse. Can you see that? Those little marks? Here, see this little piece of rope? I can kind of add that in there like so. I'm not trying to be like real super exacting with this, but just kind of adding these little touches here and there just to give a little bit of dimension. Okay. Oh, here's some of these logs up here. Adding a little bit of highlights just so it's not the same exact color as the cabin, because these logs would be on a vertical and the cabin, the walls would be vertical, so maybe the horizontal area is capturing a little bit more light. Like, let's put a little bit more light on them here. Right underneath this window. See this right here? These logs are kind of illuminated like that. Right down in here. I can put a little bit more illumination from that window down here on these planks like that. Okay, now here's this color. Let me see. A little bit more on the pier. Okay, so this color, it's this like tan-ish color. Let's bring that into some other areas. Okay. Add some down on my water as well. Now, sometimes when you're going over previously applied dots, you might be picking up some of that dried gel, and it's going up in the roller and kind of clogging it, so you have to kind of get it flowing again like this, and get that out of there. These tips are probably like a 0.7. I don't think there's intermediates like 0.6s, but it feels like it's going on in a smaller dot than the 0.7 uniball pens. Okay, something like that. So it's going to bring in some of those areas to life a little bit. And, alright, I want to kind of bring it alive even more. So, let me see. Oh boy, I thought I bought a really bright Uniball Signo yellow. This is a pastel yellow, but I thought I had a really bright one. Maybe I didn't buy it. I was thinking about it. Okay. And let's put a lot of these kind of like little clustered. Now this is not going to represent lighting, but it's going, well, I guess reflected light, but this is going to represent kind of like little spring wildflowers, these little yellow ones. You know, it's like carpeted. I'll kind of cluster them so it's not so monotonous though. Put some right up here on the bluff. It brings this little ridge here to life. So I kind of cluster it, and then I kind of spread them out a little bit more, like that. So kind of have a few of them, like that. And then kind of spread them out a little bit, you know, apart from it. This little area right in here is fairly dull, so let me go in here and add a few little flowers or highlights, whatever you want to call it. So you can do this, I mean, because I'm doing it in color, maybe it represents more flowers or something like that, but if you do it in white, it would probably, it could be little white flowers, but it could just represent lighting, like a little shimmering light or something of that sort. This little area in here, yeah, you just put a few little things like that, and it kind of perks it up a little bit. Get that focus in, there we go. So that little area in there kind of brings that shaded area to life a little bit. So one's back here and here. And here we go down here. And for those that you who might lupin, maybe some purple ones, kind of interspersed. That kind of purple and yellow really make for a fantastic combination. Just saw a lot of it out in the desert. It's also a lot of it in the hills too. Chaparral. It's a little bit more subtle. Okay, that purple in there. Okay, I don't think I'm going to add too much, but why don't we do a little treatment around that chimney there in the form of some white pigment ink. Just a little Q-tip right here. I'll put a little billowing smoke coming out of there. Let me smash this down. This is not soft enough. Kind of loosen up the fibers a little bit. Like that. I want a soft application, so I need a soft applicator to do it. Okay, like that. I'll remove some of it with my finger. I don't want too much. I don't want to go overboard with it. Something like that. So it's kind of just trailing off a little bit. Like so. Maybe extend a little bit more. It's going to dry lighter or darker than what it looks like when freshly applied, so I'll put a little bit more down like that. Okay. A little bit of mist on the water or something too. But for the most part, I think that looks done to me. I think I'll make a card out of this one too. Morning Rider. Morning Spring Rider. Oops. I smudged a little bit of that tree there, but oh well. I forgot to kind of watch out for that. That's going to be a little bit wet for a little bit of time. Maybe here, I'll put a little bit of a highlight on some of these trees and subdue that smudging. I completely forgot about that. I kind of come in here and add a few little highlights to my, some of these trees in here. Like that. It'll bring the tree out a little bit from the background. A little bit more, gives it a little bit more dimension. Something like that. I think that looks done. Alright. So, fun little scene. I like the composition of that rider in there too. I think it really added to the overall. But having some figure up on the bluff, some kind of living element, creates that kind of visual dynamic, going on between those two areas, which is always fun to do. You put a person in there and an animal in the background, or two animals or something like that, two focal points. And it creates kind of a visual dialogue within the scene, so, yeah. Fun stuff. If you use VersaFine Black, gotta watch out. It takes a little bit of time to dry. If you've got a few hours or something like that, I'm just going to let it dry overnight before I do anything to it too. And I'll probably spray it as well, and that'll seal that pigment ink application off a little bit more. But hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and thanks as always for tuning into the channel.